Even the most secluded princess would not have been as quiet as the man in the mask. The thought almost made Basin smile. If the man with him spoke in this situation, his true identity might be discovered. The strategist had been looking at the masked lord with amusement for some time now. Basin thought the old tanuki seemed to have some mischief in mind, but he did not know what it could be. The tanuki swirled his cup, enjoying the aroma, and then he drank. For a second, his expression showed distaste, but then he realized the drink really did need a glass vessel to bring out its full aroma. Seeing that the others had finished their refreshments, Lacan took a piece of paper from the folds of his robe. The other two leaned in. Lacan unfolded the paper, grinning. Basin nearly choked when he saw what it was, but he managed to maintain his composure. He looked around as calmly as he could. The tanuki, the fox, and the dog each had one attendant. Otherwise, there was no one else here. Still, how could he show something like that with such pride? The paper held a plan for a Pfeiffer firearm, drawn with great detail. It was not a traditional Pfeiffer like Basin had used before. This was one of the newest models, small and light. The plan was likely prepared by studying the weapon used to attack his true master during the recent hunt. Lacan said, "I believe this is one of the newest models from the West. Observe this, it is the real innovation. There is no more fuse." He pointed to the weapon's trigger. The end of the hammer did not have a fuse, but something else entirely. Basin looked at it somewhat perplexed. "Maybe it is not so easy to tell from the picture, but there's a flint attached here," Lacan said. The eye behind his monocle squinted. "It removes the need for a fuse. Fewer misfires and remarkably simple construction. Most impressive." Shishu stroked his beard. His expression remained unreadable. "Yes, indeed. If we were to mass-produce these, we could revolutionize the organization of the army. Tighter, more mobile formations, it would be beautiful. It would be like a lance that can move horizontally." He seemed to be referring to a shogi piece when he said lance. If a piece that could only attack forward were given lateral movement, it would be a great threat. Lacan said, "To think a weapon like this is in the hands of rogues who would dare endanger the heir's life." He shook his head dramatically, but a smile remained on his lips. He was enjoying this, and even Basin could tell. "Strange indeed," Shishu said. "How do you suppose the fiends got their hands on such implements?" "Excellent question," he replied. "I thought it was your job to answer it," Lacan said. "In principle, yes, but well, I am sorry to say that the person in charge of getting that answer from those who might know it became a little over-enthusiastic. Now I am afraid none of them will be telling us anything. It was easy enough to guess what the person had gotten over-enthusiastic about. Criminals had no rights, especially those who tried to assassinate a member of the royal family. But to be so eager to torture people who might give valuable information was a significant mistake. Were Shishu's people really that bad at their jobs? If only we could discover where they came from." Lacan crossed his arms and then took a paper-wrapped parcel from his sleeve. It looked like a slice of mooncake. He took a bite, chewed noisily and swallowed. Some crumbs stuck to the stubble on his chin. The attendant standing behind him watched with exasperation. She wondered if he had not heard anything. The sweet smell of the snack joined the mix of osmanthus and fruit juice. Lacan's eyes were sparkling. He was smiling as if this entire exercise amused him. Shishu replied, swishing the remaining contents of his cup. He made no move to drink them, but only looked at them. "Is that so?" "Such a shame," Lacan said, and he sighed mightily. Then he tucked the blueprints back into his robe. He pulled out a different piece of paper instead. "To our real business, then." Basin was surprised. Was the matter of the Pfeiffer not what Lacan had really wanted to talk about? The strategist's plans could chill the blood, leaving Basin to wonder what he had in mind. Then he unfurled another piece of paper. It showed a diagram covered in white and black numbered circles. Before he could stop himself, Basin said, "Is that?" The attendant standing behind Lacan looked distant and detached. This reminded Basin of his father Gaeshan. No doubt this man had his own struggles. Basin sympathized deeply with him. "It's a diagram of the game of Go My Wife and I played yesterday." Wife? Yes, he'd heard the stories. He'd heard the rumors that the eccentric Lacan had bought out a prostitute from the pleasure district. People said the price he paid for her could have bought a small castle. They also said the pleasure district celebrated for 10 days and 10 nights. Lacan's face became that of a man speaking poetically about his beloved. It was obvious the others noticed this change in him. The masked lord's shoulders were quivering. The tanuki was clearly trying to think of some way to escape. Another game like a clash between two finely honed blades. Oh, I can't tell you how many times my pulse began to race as we played. Lacan was saying. Basin still had a lot to learn about relations between men and women. He knew that the strategist had a skewed idea of what they should be like. He continued directly through his speech of praise. He said, I did not expect her to attempt a move like this during the game. I narrowly escaped, but she attacked me again with the next stone. Lacan was enjoying himself now, his face flushed. He was talking about a game of Go, but Basin had no interest in board games, so the entire thing went straight over his head, or at least he failed to understand what was so exciting about it. Just as he began to wonder how long the monologue would go on, the tanuki stood up. I apologize for interrupting your fine speech, but I have work to attend to. Thank you for the drink, such a shame. It was a fine game indeed. I will be sure to have a copy of the diagram sent to you along with a booklet of my commentary. Thank you, but you needn't trouble yourself. The idea was more than even the tanuki could bear. Oh, it's no trouble at all, Sir Shishu. I will even include the diagram from my previous game, and I do hope you will have a look at them. He was very good at foisting things on people. One had to give him that. Shishu apparently decided that it would be easier just to play along and finally nodded. Lacan laughed. Ha ha ha, you see there was no need to argue. Ah yes, how about I throw this in too? I would love for you to enjoy its lovely red in a glass cup. We do so enjoy talking with each other. It would be wonderful to sit down and have a nice long chat with you about our wives. Indeed, as I said, I wish you would rethink things. Thought Basin. The masked lord seemed to think the same thing as his shoulders shifted slightly. Shishu, however, said nothing further and simply left the pavilion. Basin glanced into the silver cup he had left behind. There was still a mouthful of juice remaining in it. It was an unusual color, wasn't it? Believe it or not, some grapes in the world are green, Lacan said. The juice was a light green color, certainly not red. It's just like my great-uncle said, Lacan continued. He put the last of the mooncake into his mouth and washed it down with a mouthful of juice. Now continuing from move 180, he said, resuming his commentary. Of the 4 people left in the pavilion, 3 of them wore distant, glassy expressions. It was a full hour later that Basin and his temporary master returned to the office. Though they had hardly moved, they felt immensely tired. All right if I fix my hair. Go ahead. Take your time. I'll stand guard. Basin and the masked lord were alone in the room. The questioning voice, the first thing the masked lord had said all day, sounded a little high for a man. The mask came off, revealing a single braid of lovely hair pressing against a cheek. The face in profile was slim and classically lovely. Basin had been told this person was the same age as his father, Gaeshun, but they looked at least 10 years younger. Even without the platform shoes, they would have been a good 5 shaku and 7 sun tall. That is about 170 centimeters. Standing up straight, they could easily have been mistaken for a particularly handsome civil official. Nobody would have believed that just the year before, this person had lived in the rear palace. They had been one of the 4 favored consorts. Specifically, the former pure consort Arduo. The fox is such a freak that the tanuki looks downright normal in comparison, she said bluntly. Then she sat at the desk and regarded the papers piled on it. Many of these tasks were ones Basin's true master usually handled. However, among them were secret messages from the emperor. There are not many who can defeat the strategist. He seems to care for his wife very much, and also his daughter. Basin considered that daughter and sighed deeply. He wished to become an official, just like his father. However, he did not want to be worn down by work as his father was. It seemed Basin's personality already leaned that way, though. Basin believed his master's involvement with the girl was likely due to her father. The girl was born out of wedlock, but her father had only one other close family member, a nephew he had adopted. If his master could include the young woman in his circle, it might give him some advantage over the fox strategist. Basin doubted it would be that simple, however. The very fact that the girl was the strategist's daughter made her tricky to handle, and indeed, the reason our duo had been needed so suddenly this morning to stand in for his master had something to do with her. Specifically, the girl called Maomao hadn't come home. Consort Gyukayo had reported her missing last night. What do you suppose would happen if anyone found out? Don't even say it. Arju's tone was teasing, but Basin could only clutch his head in his hands. It made him fear for his hairline, afraid he truly was heading down the same path as his father. Chapter 10, Trace's Maomao still hasn't come back. That was the gist of the letter that had arrived for Jinchi the night before. The message had been written with more detail than necessary, as formality required, but there was a clear sense of urgency in the handwriting. He believed the writer was the Jade Pavilion's chief lady-in-waiting. That meant she must have been quite stressed. This was the woman that his nursemaid Suken had praised as highly capable. She had worked at the Jade Pavilion when Jinchi took Maomao back for a while. To be perfectly honest, Jinchi thought the girl would be fine on her own for the night. She would slip out from time to time. He had witnessed it himself more than once, but she was usually back by morning. That is why he found this entire thing surprising. When he arrived at the Jade Pavilion, the ladies-in-waiting who had served the longest watched him apprehensively. They were going through the motions, but they seemed distracted. The newer girls were working industriously. He entered the living room and found Consort Gyukayo reclining on a generous couch. Princess Lingli was playing in another room. The chief lady-in-waiting Hongniang was also there, her face set. Gyukayo held a folding fan in front of her mouth. She looked much as she usually did. Jinchi said, "You look well, milady." Gyukayo replied, making clear she was not going to waste any time on formalities. She seemed less calm about the situation than she let on. "I thought you had run off with her again, but it appears I was mistaken at least. Honestly, milady, have I ever been so rude?" The truth was, Jinchi shared her worry. "I wonder if she has gotten involved in some new dangerous events," Gyukayo said. "Do we know what she was doing?" Hongniang interjected. "Yes, until noon the day before yesterday." She explained that Maomao had gone to the medical office to prepare the mugwort for the moxibustion. Liuhumen had explained his list of health-related provisions for the rear palace. He said Maomao had been very much in favor of the idea. So perhaps she went to the institute for practical studies, Liuhumen had said. The old eunuch who ran the place confirmed that Maomao had in fact been there. But after that she seemed to vanish. She went to gather the mugwort and then she went to the school. Where did she go after that? I believe she was caught up in something, Hongniang said. She appeared calm, but there was a hint of distress in her manner. It was evident she wanted to defend Maomao. I checked the most suspicious places, but there was nothing. And Hongniang was, after all, Gyukayo's serving woman. She could not go making a commotion on her own. She had to rely on Jinchi. Jinchi crossed his arms and grunted. It was hard to imagine anything that would inspire Maomao to disappear of her own accord. She could be brusque at times, but she understood her position. She also had a way of underestimating her own value. However, she certainly knew that leaving her mistress without permission would bring punishment. Either some specific circumstance prevented her from coming home, or she had simply been rendered incapable of returning. It was the worst thing he could think of. "Do you suppose anyone had some kind of grudge against her?" Gyukayo inquired. With more than 2,000 women and 1,000 eunuchs at the rear palace, there were bound to be one or two people a person didn't get along with. Sometimes such differences could conceivably spill over into actual harm. Grudges. "Against her, there are plenty, I assume," Hongniang said. They all fell silent. The fact that no one could deny it was unsettling. Some of the women of the Crystal Pavilion, particularly, probably had it out for Maomao. Maomao would not be able to resist physical force, Gyukayo said. The young lady knew a great deal about poisons, but she was small and not very strong. Someone said if a whole group attacked her she would be dead. Gaeshan said yes, that is true, and his brow furrowed. He continued, but I somehow doubt she would travel to the next life alone. They all fell silent again. Everyone in the room knew Maomao well. They knew that even when facing physical violence she wouldn't be quiet. She would think and find some way to take at least one of her attackers with her. Jinchi said, at present, there is no discernible reason for her disappearance. That means she will have to be punished. Maomao was often given special treatment, but there were limits. He continued, saying that before they could punish her, they must find her first. He decided the best course of action would be to retrace her steps again. When they arrived at the medical office, the doctor with the thin moustache welcomed them with tea. He seemed depressed, however. Liu Hemen was writing calmly. When Jinshi and his group arrived, he came to greet them, dragging one leg. You must be here about Maomao. Liu Hemen was quite perceptive. He thought they would likely get more useful information from him than from the moping doctor. I'd like you to tell your story again, Jinshi said. Of course, Liu Hemen replied, and he proceeded to outline the events simply but clearly. Unfortunately, the inquiry yielded no information Jinshi hadn't heard at the Jade Pavilion. Is that everything? It is, sir. Jinshi was beginning to get irritated. Gaoshan alerted him with a nudge, indicating he was tapping his foot noisily. Knowing he had to do something, Jinshi looked around the medical office. What about the other Maomao? Isn't the cat here today? I believe she is out on a walk. It was Gaoshan who answered, sounding dispirited. Jinshi was aware that his attendant had been quietly bringing a fish along each time they came to the rear palace recently. Jinshi had thought petting that furball might help him feel a little better, of all the times for her not to be here. Usually this is about when she comes around to beg for food, the doctor said. True, she is a little late, Liu Hemen agreed. The two of them looked at each other. The doctor said, stroking his chin, come to think of it, when the young lady left here, Maomao was practically plastered to her. That was new information, though not of great consequence. Cats naturally play with anyone nearby. Liu Hemen asked, is that how she appeared to you? That's a good question. She seemed very close, not really playing at all. That was right when you went to the restroom, Liu Hemen. The young lady mentioned the consort sleeps lightly. Liu Hemen didn't respond, but walked over to the medicine cabinet and looked at all of its drawers. He finally opened one drawer and placed some dried berries on a piece of wrapping paper. Did she take any of these with her? I am sorry to say I do not remember, the doctor confessed. He looked into the drawer. I do feel like there were more of them in there before. Perhaps she took some. Liu Hemen nodded, then turned to Jinshi. Forgive me, but may I be permitted to look for our kitten? He added, still looking supremely calm. It might also give us the chance to find the other Maomao. Evidently he had some idea. Jinshi reflected that Maomao and her adoptive father very much resembled each other. And what purpose will finding this cat serve? It may serve no purpose at all. We will have to see, Liu Hemen said. He walked along, dragging his leg. His kneecap had been removed when he was banished from the rear palace. This was punishment for the death of the heir to the throne, the current emperor's firstborn son. Children died frequently. To be mutilated and banished because of it seemed like Liu Hemen's bad luck. Now the eunuch examined the strange berries in his hand. He had taken this herbal medicine from the medicine cabinet. This is a good specimen, he commented, still fresh. The aroma is still strong. He looked around. Gaoshan was walking behind Jinshi carrying a fish. He occasionally offered a quiet meal, but Jinshi pretended not to hear him. If Basin had seen his father this way, the blood would have drained from his face. Gaoshan did everything he could to play the serious father in front of his son. The other eunuchs split up to look for the cat. Cats' territories typically aren't that large, Liu Hemen said. Most animals did not travel more than half a li. There were exceptions, of course. They might wander a little farther when in heat, but our kitten is still young enough that we probably do not have to worry about it. However, he was interrupted by a voice from behind. Master Jinshi, we found her, one of the eunuchs said. They followed him. They were in the northern quarter of the rear palace. Parts of the area were separated from the southern quarter by only a single wall. This wall had holes small enough for a kitten to sneak through. The animal, he had been informed, had originally been found not far from the wall. When they got to the kitten, she was rolling back and forth on the ground, stretched out pathetically by the roots of the tree. The roots showed signs that she had scratched at them. Some small berries lay on the ground beside her. Jinshi crouched down and scratched Maomao under the chin. She squinted with pleasure, then turned over and went to sleep. So she has been sleeping? Jinshi asked. It looked almost as if she was drunk. Look at these, Liu Hemen said, picking up some of the berries. They resembled the medicine he had brought along. He looked at them closely and then studied the scratch marks on the tree. There was another berry inside the hollow of the tree. When he reached inside, he came up with a scrap of paper. Maomao must have done this, he said. He opened the scrap of paper. Nothing was written on it. Yes, but what was she trying to tell us? Jinchi said with a slight smile. We will have to go back to the medical office to find out, Liumen replied. Then he bent down, scooped up Maomao and started walking. Maomao and Liumen had one thing in common. You never knew what they were going to do next. They both seemed to believe that showing was better than telling, or at least better than explaining beforehand what they had in mind. Demonstration was the quickest way for the intelligent to explain something to those less gifted. Liumen was saying, this is catnip. It is a feline favorite and induces a state much like drunkenness. You can make a tea with it that protects against chills and encourages good sleep. Maomao must have intended it for consort Gyokyu. Then, when she suddenly found herself in dire straits, she put it to good use.